most of us who go through the sort of a classic school system, whether it's in Canada or France where I live now, the things that are valued are the right, the wrong, the black, the white, the logic, those intelligences, and all the more artistic, softer, emotional intelligences aren't valued at all, which is why I think a lot of us struggle with the control and with the being vulnerable as well, because in a world where there's only black and white, there isn't any room for anything else.
And I'm so happy to have the chance to speak with you today, Zoe. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for asking me.
I looked at your Instagram profile and I looked around a bit on your website, and I'm really curious to know how you went from being a corporate lawyer to a photographer. I think that's fantastic.
I think that's the thing that intrigues most people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, I think as a kid, as a child, I always loved art. I always loved drawing, music, dance, art galleries, and everything. But I was good at school. I was, sort of fairly near the top of the class. And so I think there was a sort of expectation that when it came to choosing A-levels, I was born and brought up in the UK, so I went through the UK education system. When it went to choosing A-levels and then university, there was this sort of expectation that I would do something serious. And I can remember, I have distinct memories of being sort of 16, 17, 18, thinking, I'm really not sure this is what I want to do, but it didn't feel as though there was any option. And I just kept putting off the decisions. It was like, well, I'll study, at A-levels I studied languages and history and general science and stuff. And then when I was applying for universities, I can remember people saying to me, well, law's great because you can do anything with law. You don't have to be a lawyer. You can do. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll do that then because, and I was just putting off this decision. But then, of course, you do 4 years of university and law school. And then the obvious step is to become a lawyer. And once again, it was just, I sort of fell into it because I could, and people offered me jobs and things. And it was like, okay, without really thinking, blimey, I have to do this for the rest of my life. And then started work as a corporate lawyer and quite quickly realized that I really didn't enjoy it. But then there's the guilt of, I've studied this for sort of 4 or 5 years and I'm being well paid, and you get sucked into a life. You're surrounded by people who do similar things, and you get sucked into a life that there's a lifestyle that goes with it that you just don't see any other option to do anything else. So I carried on for a few years, and then I had children, and we were living in London. And then my husband at the time was seconded to an office in Moscow in Russia about the same time that we started a family. And it seemed the perfect get out to me to not go back to work because I've got small children, and I sort of thought of going bored. I can have a break and I can sort of work out what I want to do for the rest of my life. And quite quickly started drawing again, painting again, was doing much more music, and just realised I was so much happier when I was doing things like that I loved. And then sort of slowly evolved into photography. So I think my sort of first love was always drawing, painting. I always loved dance, music, as I said. But all of those things demand quite a lot of time. They demand a lot of effort and quite a lot of concentration to produce something. And with small children, I didn't have that time. And I think I love creating, but I like creating something as well. And so picking up the camera, I quite quickly realized that the time lapse between doing something and having something that I've done was much shorter than doing drawing or painting or dance or music or anything. And that, particularly at the time, was massively attractive to me.
What are some of the themes that you explore through your photography?
Oh, I think there are a few things that I'm massively interested in. I'm massively interested in periods of transition. So specific age groups, sort of late teens, I'm very, very interested in. I think partly because of, like I said, felt quite lost at that age. And so I think there's a personal need for me to explore that age again and again and again, and to try and show people that they're seen and that it's okay to not know, and it's okay to feel a bit lost, and also to sort of share that with people, that because I think we live in a society that we don't like showing that we don't know things. And so we tend to sort of hide it. We tend to go along with things, even though we're questioning them inside, because we don't feel as though we can share the fact that we don't know and we're not sure about things. So yeah, periods of transition where I think we all feel a bit lost in periods of transition. So there's this sort of late teens, then there's motherhood, early motherhood, that interests me. And quite recently, sort of more towards the end of the life, so elderly people as well, who are sort of transitioning into either sort of residential homes where they're being looked after, where they're sort of taking a sort of final decision as to where they're going to live or where they're going to live out the rest of their lives.
That seems to be key in your life as well. So that the transition, at least from doing work that didn't inspire you or interest you really, into doing something that was much more fulfilling. It's amazing, because I feel like I can relate to parts of that story for sure, except I didn't make the decision that you did. I didn't make that brave choice to say, no, actually, let me try to find something I really want to be doing, as opposed to what I believe I should be or I have been trained to do. And I stayed in that path, and you took the other path, which is really inspiring.
Thank you. It's strange, actually, because you're not the first person to tell me that they think it's a brave decision, and yet it doesn't feel brave.
I guess I wasn't able to do it, so I'm not sure what it was that I didn't have, that you had, that you were able to make that choice and do something that was more meaningful to you, and actually look at it, to step back and say, I have the rest of my life ahead of me. How do I want to spend it? And you made a transition into something that was quite different from what you were doing before. And I imagine you were good at it. So it's not just that you were doing it, but you were actually good at it. And you could have kept doing it if you wanted to.
Maybe, but I think I'd got to the point where I didn't feel as though I could do it anymore.
Okay.
It was that visceral, almost, it was making me deeply unhappy. And so I think I'd got to the point where it was just, I can't go back to this. I can't carry on.
Okay. Because that whole argument about, study law because you can do anything after that, I heard that too when I was growing up. That was very common. A lot of people went into law for that reason, I think. And maybe quite a few left it because they said, no, actually, when you do law, you become a lawyer. So, and I don't want to be a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so scary, isn't it? And what's amazing is I have 4 children, and my third child is 15. He's a boy. And I actually heard myself saying to him the other day, oh, but, it doesn't matter what you choose now, because you could study economy, you could study history, you could study law, you can always do something else afterwards. And as I was saying it, I was thinking, oh, my God, I'm just repeating what I hated being told. But I guess all parents do that, but no.
Do you photograph your children a lot?
I photograph them all the time.
How do they feel about that?
I don't really know. I think they don't mind. I assume they don't mind because they still let me do it. And they're teenagers now. My youngest is 11. So I have 11, 15, 17 and 19. They moan sometimes, but they still generally let me photograph them. I think I've always told them that it's like a love letter to them. Like every photograph I make of them is a love letter to them. And so they sort of go along with it. I don't know whether sometimes they're just being nice to me by letting me do it because they know I love doing it. But I do photograph them a lot, and I made a massive conscious effort that once they became teenagers, to carry on doing it, because it becomes harder than when they're little kids. Obviously, little kids they don't feel the need to say no so much, but they're changing all the time and they're with you all the time as well. And then as they get older, they're less with you, they're more independent. But I think for me, it was incredibly important to continue photographing them and to show them that I think my relationship with them and their relationship with each other and their existence as an individual person is as important to me at this age that it was when they were 2 or 3 as well.
So you talked before about you're interested in people who are going through transition, and I'm assuming there's an aspect of vulnerability in that for them. That's how we feel as we're going through a transition. And you also said something around how difficult it can be for us to admit when we don't know, that we tend to try to hide that. So is vulnerability something that interests you as part of your work?
Yeah, massively.
What does it mean to you?
I think it means the ability to show that you're either scared or apprehensive about something, or that you're scared of being harmed, but that you'll admit that you have this fear, that you have this apprehension of being harmed, but that you'll show it anyway. And it's definitely a trait of people that I'm massively drawn to.
How do you set people up when you're taking portraits? Because I'm assuming a lot of them come to you from that place. A lot of them are coming to you from a place of vulnerability when you open yourself and you're willing to have your photograph taken in an interesting way, in a meaningful way.
Yeah. It sort of depends. I spend quite a lot of time talking to the person before I get the camera out. It's that sort of connection and the ability to listen often as well that enables people to open up, I think. And then actually taking the portrait can be quite quick because there's not much you can do. The ideas that be there beforehand, and then the discussion will lead from one thing to another. And I view it much more as a collaboration of making a portrait of somebody, but with somebody. So part of the reason I constantly tell myself this is because of my vulnerability of fear that I won't succeed, and so it's easier for me to say to them, "Look, this is something we're doing together. It needs both of us to do it. It can't just be me." Obviously, I have to master the technical side of it and the camera and everything, and the composition. But the person on the other side of the lens has to want to be seen as well. I can't force that, And so I think it's that as well, is being open with somebody about what you can do and what you can't do and what you're scared of as well in terms of being the photographer, which enables them in turn to share what they're scared of. Because for most people, or for a lot of people, being in front of a camera is uncomfortable. It's not something we're very comfortable with. And so it can feel very vulnerable as well, I think.
You mentioned it. Can you talk a little bit more about your vulnerability as a photographer when you said you can be worried about whether or not you're going to do a good job taking their photographs?
I'm worried every time.
Doesn't it just get really easy after a while and old hat?
No, it doesn't. I think it's because why doesn't it? I think it's because I care. I always want to do something different. Not necessarily different, but something that corresponds and is truthful about that person. And so there's always a pressure to react to what they're bringing as well. But I think in in some ways, the day that you stop worrying about that is the day you should probably not do it anymore as well. I think it's, I can talk myself into being confident enough to do it. It doesn't mean the fear is not there.
Do people usually look at the photos with you, like after a session, or do you send the photos? I'm curious what you get from their reactions to their photos.
No, they don't normally see them with me unless I deliver prints in person, but they've normally seen them online in a gallery or something first. And it's interesting because some people respond straight away. They'll see their photos and they respond with a message or an email or will call me straight away. And other people take a bit longer. And that can be highly vulnerable as well for me. It's like, I know they've seen them and they've not said anything. And do I send a quick message and check that they're okay and they like them? And I've stopped doing that now because I realized that actually for some people it's just that they're busy, and particularly now people have mobile phones and they can check things really quickly, but they're in the middle of actually doing something else, or, and they don't have time to respond. And then they get home and they've got family life or other things going on. And it's, for some people, it's not a priority as well. It's not the most important thing to do that day, which I completely get. But most people do respond after a while, which is good.
What kinds of responses do you get? Are you ever surprised by how people feel when they look at photographs of themselves?
It varies massively. I think some people, nearly all of the responses are positive. Some people are more touched, I think, by seeing themselves than others, or some people will let themselves be more touched than others as well. So it massively depends. And often, I often get a sort of an email or a text message sort of response, which is, love the photos, they're great, thank you very much. And then months later, or even sometimes years later, I'll actually see the person, and it's then that you get the real response of how they felt. And interestingly as well, I think quite a lot of people, particularly women, they'll send a sort of message saying that they love the photos straight off, but actually if I see them months later or a year later and they've re-looked at the photos, they have a completely different reaction, but a much deeper reaction to the photos. It's almost as though they sort of put a bit of armor on to look at them at first, and it's like, they're okay, so yeah, I look okay, so I can send a message saying they're okay. And then they'll look at them sort of 6 months later or a year later, and it's then that they're able to see themselves in the way that I saw them at the time. That's all vulnerability as well, and the fear of not liking what we were going to see.
Or even just being surprised by it. I guess because I've had my photos taken recently and I'm kind of shocked. Sometimes and I'm like, is that what people see when they look at me? Because that's not how I see myself at all. So what is that image that I'm looking at? That's what people see.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously we know ourselves. We see ourselves in the mirror, but probably not properly, because we'll always focus on a certain thing that we either hate or like. But we know what's going on inside as well, which obviously, no matter how well you know somebody and how much time you spend with somebody, you're never going to know exactly what's going on inside, because we all filter, even when we're being our most honest. There's some filter, there's something that we always keep inside of us. And so it's, seeing how we think that other people might see us can be quite disturbing.
Yeah. And I guess I am interested in that filter, whatever it is that we put between what's inside and what shows on the outside, and how much can we show? How much do we choose to show? And especially, we may think that we're reserving some things within us. Actually, we're not. Like this, sometimes I think, oh, no one could see that, but actually they do. I think I'm hiding it, and I'm not.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
That's photography I find fascinating for that. Portrait photography, very fascinating.
Yeah, I did last summer, I did a project where I photographed some 17, 18-year-olds just as they were about to leave home to go to university. But they're not sort of leaving home for good, but they are, for the first time, going to live on their own in a place where their family won't be. And And what was really interesting was I photographed about 20 girls and boys in a group. And most of them I knew sort of tenuously. So they weren't the sort of best friends of my kids, but they were in classes with them. And we live in a small village, and they go to the local school in a small town. So they sort of by the time they're 17, 18, they know everybody who's their age group. And what was interesting in the photos was that the kids who outwardly portray as tough and strong and know what they want to do and were really excited about leaving and going to live on their own and having their whole life, in the photographs appeared the most vulnerable.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I found that fascinating. It was almost as though it was a sort of guard that they'd put up, and the moment that it fell, there was intense vulnerability there, that in the other kids who were openly saying that they were not sure how they were going to cope and that they were going to miss their family and that they were a bit apprehensive about it, there seemed a quiet calm that portrayed in the portraits as strength rather than vulnerability.
I wonder if they could see that, or maybe later in life when they look back at those photos, they'll see it. Maybe they can't see it right now.
Yeah.
Are you self-taught? How did you pick up all the technical aspects? Okay.
Yeah, I'm completely self-taught.
And do you shoot digital or?
Currently I shoot a mixture. I do about half and half of digital and film. I love shooting film, and that would be my choice if I had the choice now, particularly with the kind of work that I do now. It's much slower, so the ability to use film would be great, except there's a price tag that goes with film that it makes it just harder for certain people to be able to afford a session on film, and I don't want to price myself out.
What is it about film? It's better.
I think it is the ability to, or the fact that you have to slow down because you're limited in the number of frames you have. And also the film cameras that I have are all completely manual. So they're manual focus, they're old cameras. So there's no autofocus, there's no ability to just quickly switch a switch and everything will be done for you. That's not available. And so it makes me slow down. It's also a really great way to get people talking, because people are intrigued by the cameras these days. People are so used to seeing digital cameras and being able to see the image on the back of the camera, or people taking photos on phones, that as soon as you get out a sort of medium format, old manual focus camera with this sort of film bit clipped on the back, they're just, they're intrigued by it and interested in it. And so it gets the conversation flowing as well a little bit. But yeah, I think it's also that, on a medium format film, I've got 12 shots. I shoot 6x6, which, on a digital in 10 minutes, you can shoot like 300 photos. So the process is much slower. It's much more intentional. So, and I try to bring that into how I shoot on digital as well. It's just difficult because you have the ability to do more. So
I find that very interesting, just how your choice of tool can inform your process and how the process is all part of the work that you create. So that whole idea that you would have to slow down and that you don't have limitless shots. You're not just clicking because you can. You have to be very focused on the key moments, I guess, that you're trying to capture.
Yeah. I think there's also on film, there's an element of trust in myself and in the universe as well, that comes into it as well, because, I could mess up the settings completely and there'll be nothing on the roll. Touch wood, that doesn't happen often, but it could happen. But there's this sort of, there's a trust that there's a third energy almost there working with me that I like, that I don't quite know. There's less control, I think. So you have to sort of surrender to the fact that there's less control, because you can't check immediately shot that you've done. And so you have to wait until it's developed and scanned and sent back to you or printed. And so there's an element of surrendering to that loss of control and accepting that there is this other power, maybe, or however you want to see it, that is around when you create, and that you have to trust.
I like that, because that's, in a way, that's what the people who come to you to be photographed are doing as well. They're relinquishing control. They're putting themselves in your hands. And then you are, in a way, putting yourself in the hands of the universe, or, whatever, the sequence of events or how things unfold, that you're not controlling that.
Yeah.
But you're both surrendering to the moments that you're able to capture.
In fact, it's interesting you said that, because thinking about it, the portrait sessions that I do shoot on film, that I always do feel that there's much more balance between the person being photographed and myself. And maybe that's what it is. It's the fact that we're both surrendering more. And I feel less the need to say that I can control it all. So,
and you do quite a bit of self-portraiture too, don't you?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. What do you get from doing that? What do you learn from that?
I think I've done self-portraiture probably for 7 or 8 years now, in stops and starts. I think right at the very beginning, it was a way to practice taking photos of somebody when I didn't have somebody to practice on. So probably comes back to the vulnerability about not being sure about what I was. It was a way to practice settings, poses, different things that I didn't want to practice on people that were paying me. And then it was actually during the pandemic, when we were in lockdowns, that I produced an awful lot of self-portraits. And I think during that period, it was less the practice, and it was much more, it was the need to create something, but it was also a sort of need to prove my own existence to myself, that I was here, and a sort of searching for something that I'm still not quite sure what it is, that sort of scratches an itch to of various things that I think go on in my head sometimes and take up too much space, and self-portraiture seems to calm them down a little bit. So during the pandemic, I created a lot of self-portraits. And the themes are similar, the period, the sort of existence, the transitions, the parts of my life when I've struggled with transition, sort of trying to revisit them, trying to search for answers to those questions.
Do you see things in yourself you didn't realize when you look at the pictures? Do you see things that I didn't realize that I felt that, or I saw that, or?
I think there's a slight contradiction sometimes in terms of how I feel and what the picture portrays sometimes. And I struggled with this for a long time, because a lot of the sort of feedback I would have on the self-portraits, or lots of people would comment and say, oh, they're so calm, and they're so poetic, and they're so beautiful. And I was feeling like a sort of duck, and inside my head was sort of manic paddling under the water. And I seemed to be sort of portraying this sort of calm exterior, which wasn't at all how I was feeling. And I struggled with it, because I was thinking, how can people think this when I'm doing this because I just feel so incredibly sort of worked up sometimes, and my way of dealing with it is to create this self-portrait. And then I was reading something a few months ago that was saying that actually some artists create something that they need to see. at the time. And I think maybe that's what I was doing as well sometimes. So I create these images sometimes that a lot of people think are so calm and beautiful and poetic. And the need to create them was from a completely different space, but it was creating something that I needed to see. And that helped me massively, because it's enabled me to sort of step back and think, well, I can put these photos up there and people can take what they need from them as well. And so if they need to see that I'm this calm, poetic person, then let them see that. It doesn't matter that I don't think I am, but it's fine.
I find that fascinating, because I am evolving very slowly from a very naive place where I used to think that when you take pictures of people, those people are sharing or showing something. And it's not necessarily universal, but that there is this basic human interpretation. I can look at you and I can see a certain thing, and somebody else is going to see that same thing, and I feel like I'm sharing that thing. And that's not the case, like, at all. And I love the duck, because the duck is perfect, because the feet are going like this under the water. Above water, everything looks calm and serene. And so that's a great image to remember, that we don't necessarily show, we often don't show, I guess, what's inside. And even if we want to, we can't. It's not possible.
Yeah. And I think that's what I found so amazing, was that I feel, particularly certain self-portraits, I feel for me are incredibly sort of raw and honest, and yet people don't see the same things.
100%.
And I find it amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like the one idea that I'm working on right now, and I'm just trying to figure it out just for myself, that I'm not going to be able to articulate it because I still don't know really what it is, but it's this sort of coming from a place of wanting to be seen by others to the place of, I want to see myself in different ways. I want to explore what I either have on the inside or what I'm showing on the outside to me. And that's all that I can really do is just explore different ways of showing what I'm feeling or what's going on to me. And that's enough. But expand beyond the space that I normally allow myself, or I picture myself as I am this person, and I want to show different sides or different aspects, but just to me. And that's enough. That's fine. If no one else sees it, it's okay. And 100 people will look at a picture, and 100 people will think 100 different things, taken in different ways. So I liked what you said too before about, you put it out there, people are going to take what they want from it.
Yeah.
No control over that whatsoever. They're going to take what they want.
Yeah.
I find that still interesting though, as an artist. So for you, if you're trying to show through your work, if you have a theme, or you're working, and people, you just have no control whatsoever over how people take that theme. Like, you're trying to express certain things through your work, and either you have to put it out there and people just will take what they do.
Yeah. I suppose it's surrendering again to however people will interpret things. I think also in terms of art, particularly with my self-portraits, but I suspect this is true with maybe other artists as well, is that the need to create, or the desire to create something that can be interpreted differently, because we know that it's a way of creating without specifying, because otherwise we could just write it down and tell people. But we don't do that. So if we don't do that, there's a choice to create in a way that can be interpreted differently by different people, maybe. Because words are less ambiguous, aren't they? I mean, people can like books or not like books or poems and things, but generally the meaning of words is much more specific when it comes to visual arts. the ability to interpret it in 1,000 different ways is there and will always be there. So it's a choice as well to communicate that.
I don't know if that was part of your transition. I'm a corporate consultant. You were a corporate lawyer. And that is a world where you don't leave so much space for interpretation. Try very hard to communicate one thing very clearly. And I want everybody around the table to see the same thing that I do. And to go from that place to a place of openness where you're creating something that has a certain meaning to you. But once you release it in the world, it has a life of its own and it will be taken by different people in different ways. And that's maybe the whole point of it. That release, that letting go for me is really difficult. And I'm realizing that more and more, that I control things so much in my work life, that this is such a different space and you can't do that. And then the whole point is probably that you can't do that. You don't want to.
Yeah, I think that that's the crux of it. The whole point is that it opens up discussions, it opens up connections, and they might not be the connections that you intended, but it opens up connections anyway. Because if somebody responds to your work, whether it be good or bad, it's obviously touched them. There's obviously something in it that has connected with them. And that's all we can ask for, I think.
Oh, I like that a lot. I feel like you're living the life that if I had been braver, that's what I said before about how courageous you were, that you're in a place that's your whole life. I don't want to do that thing where like your work is your life, but it sort of is. And so the kind of work that you do does sort of infect how you approach life more generally. And so you making that transition to becoming a photographer.
Yeah. There is a downside to that you never finish. There's no, there's not that moment where you shut the door behind you and it's like, I'm done for the day. I'm done for the weekend. I think I didn't realize I'd signed up for that.
I'm really impressed. If I ever grow up, I want to be like you.
Oh, thank you.
I want to do something during my full days as meaningful as I think the work that you do is for you and for the people whose photographs you take, because I just find that such a compelling process. I just think it's so interesting for people to. Do people come to you, or do you sometimes approach people?
I quite often approach. Yeah.
What is it that when you see someone, what is it that draws you to them?
It tends to be the vulnerability. It tends to be somebody who doesn't look so sure. I always describe it as that if I walked into a room full of people and said, oh, who would like me to take their photograph? It would be the person cowering at the back who definitely did not have his or her hand up that I would want to photograph.
That's great. It reminds me a bit that Plato had that, who should be the politician? It's the one that does not want to. It's the last person, the one that did not put their hand up. That's the one who should be the politician, because they would do it for the right reasons, actually. They don't really want to do it at all. And so if that's the person that you approach, and they are naturally not the ones who want to have their photos taken, how do you approach them?
I'll say that I'm a photographer, that I'm doing a project on whatever it is, and that I would love to photograph them. They weren't at all interested. And then I just try and engage. Some people do say no, but generally people don't say no. Sometimes it doesn't work out because of schedules or whatever, but this is what was massively astonishing to me as well, was that when I did start approaching people, and I was terrified the first few times I approached people, I was really scared. It amazed me how many people said yes, because and I think quite a few people, they actually find it quite flattering. They like it, it's not I'm not a sort of like, I want to take your photo and stick the camera in their face. So obviously it's there's a conversation. I chat to them about what I'm looking for, where I'd like to take the photos, what they're interested in. And so it then sort of becomes organically, it becomes much more of a sort of connection and a conversation rather than me just saying, can I take your photo? Let's do it quickly. People who are most sort of nervous is because they're not quite sure what I'm going to do with the photographs, which is understandable as well.
Right. And it's not, when I tell people sometimes that I've had my pictures taken, they assume it's like a glamour shot, like, oh, did you have your hair and makeup done? And, you're going to look all fabulous. You're going to put those photos on LinkedIn. I'm like, no, it's not that kind of photo. I really look awful, actually, frankly. It's not the glamour,
no,
the gorgeous, no. It's the real people.
Yeah.
Real life.
Yeah.
I appreciate so much you making the time to speak with me today. It was really interesting.
Thank you very much. It's been great talking to you. It was really great.
Take care. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Zoe.
Sarah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.